Thursday evening, Chicago's former mayor of drama and Dalton. Credit card transactions amounting to thousands of dollars without explanation, and millions more owed to vendors.
Bombshell report highlights just how much financial trouble the village of Dalton. Realtors say the village is facing financial disaster, and they blame the mayor for mismanagement.
The recent revelation from former Chicago Mayor Lori Lightfoot about a far worse than expected fiscal crisis has sent shockwaves through Dalton and Thornton Township. While the area has long been aware of its financial struggles, the scale of the crisis is much more severe than many had realized. The township now faces millions of dollars in debt, a situation that has only worsened over time, fueling growing frustration among residents. Many are now calling for Mayor Tiffany Henyard to step down. Despite mounting pressure, Henyard has shown little remorse, continuing her term with apparent disregard for the increasing accusations of financial mismanagement, corruption, and favoritism under her administration. Her leadership has been marred by a series of scandals, including allegations of embezzlement and misuse of public funds. Rather than addressing these concerns, Henyard's actions have only further alienated the public, overshadowing any positive achievements she may have had. The recent revelation of an FBI investigation into her conduct has intensified public outcry, with many seeing it as a potential path to justice and accountability. The evidence against Henyard has changed the dynamic, leaving the public disillusioned and wary of her leadership. The administration's deep financial and service-related issues have become glaringly obvious, further eroding trust in her ability to govern. A particularly troubling discovery is the revelation that $36 million is missing from the village's general fund. This has sparked outrage and mistrust, with many believing taxpayer dollars were wasted on personal luxuries, including expensive trips and an $85,000 personal audit. Public perception of Henyard's leadership has become increasingly negative, as many believe she is out of touch with the real struggles of the community. These failures have had tangible effects on essential services, including cuts to transportation and food assistance. Thornton Township, which falls under Henyard's jurisdiction, has also suffered from mismanaged resources. Vulnerable groups, such as seniors, have been disproportionately affected, adding to the criticism of Henyard's administration. As the FBI investigation continues, some residents see it as a glimmer of hope for restoring accountability. However, many are becoming increasingly concerned that Henyard's lack of leadership is pushing the community toward collapse. The ongoing allegations of financial irresponsibility and unethical behavior paint a grim picture for the future of Dalton and Thornton Township. Some even suspect that Henyard is deliberately stalling efforts to address the township's most critical issues while enriching herself at the public's expense. Local trustees, including Chris Gonzalez, have warned that Henyard's continued neglect could have severe consequences, particularly for services like insurance, transportation, and senior care. As the situation becomes more dire, calls for a complete change in leadership are growing louder. Many hope that Henyard's removal will pave the way for a new direction, one that prioritizes financial stability, integrity, and the well-being of the community. As the township approaches a breaking point, residents are desperate for leadership that can restore confidence, accountability, and a commitment to serving the public good. Henyard's repeated absence from key township meetings, especially those addressing the ongoing insurance crisis, has only highlighted her indifference to the community's needs.
Federal agents are in fact interviewing witnesses as part of a possible investigation.
The controversy surrounding Mayor Tiffany Henyard has reached a breaking point, with mounting accusations from various sources, particularly local business owners, casting a dark shadow over her administration. Many business owners allege they were unfairly targeted, describing a climate of fear and retaliation. Those who refused to support Henyard's political events reportedly faced arbitrary fines, harsh regulatory actions, and even business closures. Critics argue that these actions reflect a clear abuse of power, threatening the financial stability of local businesses that are essential to the town's economy. As these allegations grew, public trust in Henyard's leadership continued to crumble. Residents expressed outrage, accusing her administration of prioritizing political and personal agendas over the needs of the community. This sentiment only deepened Henyard's already strained relationship with local businesses, leading to widespread calls for transparency and accountability. The scandals didn't stop with accusations of political retaliation. As more evidence of financial mismanagement and misconduct emerged, the perception of Henyard's administration as ineffective became increasingly entrenched. Many began to see these incidents as part of a troubling pattern of self-serving leadership. Critics argued that Henyard's leadership was becoming unsustainable, and the growing backlash seemed to be pushing her to a crisis point. Despite the intensifying pressure, Henyard has denied any wrongdoing, dismissing the allegations as baseless attempts to discredit her. However, her refusal to address the concerns of residents and business owners directly has only fueled the tension. Her failure to engage with the mounting discontent deepened divisions within the community and led many to believe she cared more about political survival than the town's well-being. As the controversy spiraled out of control, Henyard's reputation took a severe hit. Critics increasingly described her leadership as untenable, and calls for her removal from office became louder. The fallout from these allegations spread beyond the business community, with residents losing faith in her ability to govern effectively. Her actions, which seemed to prioritize personal gain over public welfare, led to widespread frustration. Accusations of power abuse and financial impropriety tarnished her credibility, and her continued refusal to engage with those raising concerns only intensified public dissatisfaction. With mounting evidence of misconduct and rapidly declining public trust, the pressure on Henyard has reached a boiling point. It remains unclear whether she can recover from this storm. Many believe her administration has collapsed under the weight of mismanagement and misplaced priorities, leaving her political future hanging in the balance. As calls for change grow louder, Henyard's ability to restore trust and salvage her tenure is uncertain at best.
Both of the Dalton bars that were raided and shut down last night, we visited the day before as part of our ongoing investigation into allegations of political corruption in Dalton. And this Rustin, what police was doing like they was doing a raid on the drug.
A series of highly controversial events involving Dalton Mayor Tiffany Henyard has created a deep divide within the community. With accusations of financial mismanagement, embezzlement, and retaliatory actions against local businesses dominating headlines, tensions reached a boiling point after a police raid on two popular businesses, Pablo's Baron Cafe and Ring's Baron Cafe, located just a block apart on Clyde. The operation, which involved around 10 squad cars, was described as peaceful, but the atmosphere was charged. Customers, employees, and business owners were forced out of the cafes, and many accused Mayor Henyard of orchestrating a campaign of harassment against those who refused to support her political events. Business owners claimed that the village revoked their licenses despite still operating legally under state jurisdiction. As these allegations mounted, Henyard's leadership came under intense scrutiny, with critics accusing her of prioritizing personal vendettas and political agendas over Dalton's economic well-being. The village's financial stability began to crumble, and residents grew increasingly frustrated with the lack of effective leadership. The situation escalated further when former Chicago Mayor Lori Lightfoot was appointed to investigate Henyard's alleged illicit activities. This investigation marked a pivotal moment, with Henyard's administration quickly pushing back. The mayor attempted to shift blame onto the village trustees, a move that only heightened tensions within the local government and further alienated her from a community already losing faith in her leadership. Henyard claimed the investigation was politically motivated, designed to tarnish her reputation. However, as the investigation progressed, evidence began to surface that her administration was riddled with financial mismanagement and corruption. Allegations of embezzlement, lavish personal spending, and questionable contracts began to take center stage. It became clear that Henyard's actions were focused more on personal gain than the well-being of the community, while Dalton's finances spiraled into disarray, with significant deficits and troubling irregularities in the general fund. Despite mounting evidence, Henyard dismissed the findings as part of a smear campaign, arguing that the financial issues Dalton faced were the result of systemic problems inherited from her predecessors, not her own mismanagement. However, as more officials and residents called for accountability, her defense weakened and her credibility waned. Her attempts to deflect blame were seen as increasingly desperate, and many began questioning her ability to lead effectively. Lightfoot's investigation revealed a clear pattern of financial waste and a lack of transparency in Henyard's decision-making. The findings painted a picture of an administration more concerned with personal interests than the public good. As further details emerged, public trust in Henyard's leadership eroded, and calls for her resignation grew louder. Protests against her administration intensified, with residents demanding corrective action to restore the integrity of local governance. Rather than stepping down, Henyard dug in her heels, insisting she was the victim of an unfair attack. She framed the investigation as an attempt to undermine her leadership. Her refusal to address the concerns of residents and business owners only fueled the growing anger. The longer she clung to power, the more her credibility diminished, and the more the public became disillusioned with her leadership. As the investigation unfolded, Lightfoot's findings uncovered even deeper problems within Henyard's administration, including allegations of bias and unethical behavior. These revelations underscored the dangers of unchecked power and a leadership more focused on self-interest than the needs of the community. The investigation became a rallying cry for those seeking to reclaim Dalton from political dysfunction, emphasizing the need for reform and effective leadership. Amid mounting pressure, Dalton's trustees passed a resolution demanding Henyard turn over the village's financial records. They also called for the FBI to investigate her alleged misuse of public funds. Henyard admitted to a $2 million deficit, but trustees criticized her for trying to shift the focus onto federal authorities rather than taking responsibility for the local crisis. Her request seemed designed to deflect attention from local accountability, but the trustees swiftly rejected her proposal, signaling their lack of confidence in her leadership. This marked a growing divide between Henyard and local government, leaving her administration increasingly isolated. The fallout from the vote deepened tensions within the community. The trustees acted decisively to take control of the situation, while residents grew frustrated with Henyard's refusal to accept responsibility for the financial mess. During a particularly heated meeting, Trustee Kiana Beller made a symbolic gesture by pointing out that her portrait had been removed from the walls of Village Hall, reflecting the community's growing disillusionment. At the meeting, media access was restricted, but residents made their voices heard, demanding Henyard's resignation. One resident confronted Henyard directly, saying, "You lied to us as residents. You do not stand for me, and I want you to step down as mayor today and save our village from this deficit you caused." Despite these demands, Henyard continued to frame herself as a victim of discrimination, citing her identity as a black woman in power. However, many residents rejected this argument, pointing out that their criticism wasn't about her race, but her failure to manage Dalton's finances and meet the needs of her constituents. One of the most controversial aspects of Henyard's tenure was a lavish trip to Las Vegas, where she allegedly spent thousands of taxpayer dollars on airfare, hotel accommodation, and meals. Despite repeated requests for an interview, Henyard refused to address questions about the trip, further fueling public frustration. This incident became a symbol of her disregard for fiscal responsibility and the community she was supposed to serve. As the financial crisis worsened, it became evident that Henyard's administration was mired in corruption and mismanagement. The general fund was in the red, with a $365 million deficit, while police department spending rose by 21% between January and June. Over $6 million in checks were authorized but never sent to vendors, and 2 police officers earned more overtime than their regular salaries. Numerous purchases were made using 6 different village credit cards, including $440,000 in Amazon payments. Yet receipts for many transactions were rarely provided. Despite these revelations, Henyard continued to deny any wrongdoing, dismissing the accusations as part of a broader conspiracy. However, local officials and residents stood firm in their demands for accountability. As the investigation into her activities intensified, it became clear that Henyard had evaded responsibility for her actions, refusing to engage with news organizations or provide transparency regarding the misuse of public funds. The situation in Dalton and Thornton Township grew increasingly dire, with public trust in local government rapidly eroding. Amid mounting protests, calls for reform grew louder, with residents demanding their leaders prioritize the needs of the community over personal gain. In the end, Tiffany Henyard's time in office stands as a cautionary tale about the dangers of unchecked power and the critical importance of accountability in public leadership. As the investigation continues, it's clear that her leadership has left an indelible mark on Dalton and Thornton Township, one that will take years to repair.
His credit card spending is out of control. Mayor Tiffany Henyard didn't respond to any of my requests today, and I'm told she's not in.
Tiffany Henyard, the embattled mayor of Dalton and Thornton Township, remains elusive despite repeated media attempts to secure an interview. On one occasion, I visited the village office in person to locate her, only to be told by staff that she wasn't in the office and there was no indication of when she would return. This occurred just a day before a highly anticipated community meeting, where residents once again demanded accountability for the financial mismanagement plaguing her administration. At the meeting, Henyard's criminal defense attorneys, Bob Brinley and Ed McDavid, were present, sitting alongside the village's legal team. It was clear Henyard was preparing for a long and contentious legal battle, with Brinley, a prominent federal criminal defense attorney known for his aggressive tactics, signaling that the mayor was bracing for the ongoing FBI corruption investigation. As expected, Henyard remained defiant, denying any wrongdoing. She framed herself as the victim of an unjust attack and argued that the village trustees were squandering taxpayer dollars on the investigation, portraying herself as the only one truly working for the community's benefit. Things took a more complicated turn when it was revealed that Henyard had appointed Annis Lacey, a former member of her administration with a highly controversial history, to a key position. Lacey had previously been fired by the Dalton Village Council for insubordination, and many residents and board members raised legal concerns about his promotion. Lacey had been charged with federal bankruptcy fraud and accused of lying under oath to hide assets and income from creditors. While his defense team denied the allegations, his appointment only fueled further mistrust within the community. As media attention on Lacey's legal troubles grew, whistleblowers from the board of directors began to speak out, claiming that Henyard had exploited residents, local businesses, and even her own staff to increase her political power. These insiders alleged that Henyard had created a false narrative of success, attributing the village's financial progress to the efforts of residents when much of it had been unsustainable. Despite these growing accusations, Henyard continued to dismiss her critics as attention seekers. Her refusal to engage with concerns raised by residents, business owners, and even members of her own administration only intensified the resentment against her leadership. The situation took another controversial turn with Henyard's recent appointment of Michael A. Smith as her top assistant lobbyist, a position paying $100,000 annually. Smith, a well-known South Suburbs politician, had a checkered past, including a 2012 scandal in which a trustee resigned after pleading guilty to stealing patrol duties and impersonating a police officer. Smith had also faced multiple charges ranging from official misconduct to domestic violence, raising serious questions about his fitness for such a prominent role. His appointment only deepened suspicions about Henyard's judgment, with many residents and trustees viewing it as another example of the mayor surrounding herself with questionable figures. This further alienated her from both political allies and the general public. As Dalton struggled with significant financial challenges, these troubling decisions seemed to exacerbate the crisis rather than offer solutions. The growing frustration among residents and trustees only amplified calls for Henyard's resignation. Despite the mounting evidence of corruption and financial mismanagement, Henyard remained resolute, refusing to step down. Her continued denials and her refusal to take responsibility for the ongoing crisis, combined with the FBI investigation, left the community in a state of uncertainty. Residents were left wondering how long Henyard could withstand the mounting pressure. Although Henyard's time as mayor was far from over, her position had become increasingly unstable. Her legal battles, controversial appointments, and growing public dissatisfaction were severely undermining her ability to govern effectively. As the calls for accountability grew louder and more details of her administration's failures came to light, it became increasingly clear that her time in office was under serious threat. Whether Henyard could weather the storm and restore her credibility remained uncertain. But the widening divide between her and the community she was meant to serve suggested that her days in office could be numbered. With another community meeting on the horizon, the drama surrounding Henyard's leadership is set to unfold further, and the public will be watching closely to see what happens next.